Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Thank you to everyone who's joining us today. My name is Caitlin Martin, and I'm on the marketing team here at Yubico. I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar, Devising a Modern Phishing-Resistant MFA Strategy and Deployment Best Practices. Quickly, before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. If at any time you have a question during today's webinar, please use the Ask a Question tab located below the player. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar where we'll take audience questions. And additionally, at the end of the webinar, please take a moment and provide feedback using the Rate This tab. If you have any technical difficulties, you can go to the bottom of the page and click on Support for Viewers. And finally, the recorded version of this presentation will be available using the same URL shortly following its conclusion. Now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you all to today's presenter, David Treese. David Treese is the VP of Solutions Architecture and Strategic Integrations at Yubico, focused on architecting strong, easy-to-use, and manageable authentication solutions for the enterprise. He has worked with the FIDO Alliance to define implementation patterns for the FIDO standards. David has over 20 years architecting and implementing identity and access management systems for enterprises in the retail, manufacturing, and IT services industries. Thanks, David. I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Clayton. So yes, today in our talk, we're going to cover the threat landscape and also just how modern attacks are bypassing legacy MFA and just what are those solutions and how phishing resistant technically helps resolve that, and then talk about deployment practices to help implement these solutions. And also during this talk, I want to make sure that people ask their questions. We'll probably answer the questions at the end of the presentation, but we definitely have time for that, and there are no silly questions, so feel free to ask them. So just give a little bit of background on Yubico. Is that Yubico was founded in 2007. It's been over 10 years now, longer than that now. So, and a lot of our starting in our DNA is focused on strong authentication, but also making it easy and simple to use for our end users, because we know that authentication can be complicated and cumbersome, and to make it strong is also adds more complexity. So we partnered with the FIDO Alliance back in the early days and became inventors of the initial standards, and are actively one of the leaders in building out the standards today. Additionally, we've been working a lot with the U.S. governments and other governments around the world to ensure that phishing-resistant solutions are understood and also implemented, just to be able to provide that higher level security that we all need. But saying that is part of our DNA is to ensure that every user can be able to have a strong phishing-resistant solution, and not just for people like governments that might need a higher level security, because frankly, our security is needed for everyone. So a little bit about Yubico as well is that we are focused a lot on working with partners, over 800 technology partner integrations across the globe, as well as over 4,500 customers that are actually using our solutions. A number of those customers are in the high tech industry, because they've usually are traditionally early adopters and see this technology, and frankly has helped us build it out to that point. And we'll go into this a little bit deeper, is to be able to these solutions provide 99.9% credential theft risk reduction based on independent studies that have been done after deployments. And we have over the course of the life of Yubico created and sold over 22 million keys. So that's a significant number of product that is out there, and these are based on the FIDO standards. A number of them are. So as we look at the attacks, and this probably is not new news to people on this call, but still, as you look at the people that track, how attacks are being done by the attackers, is still they're leveraging phishing-resistant type of attacks where they are stealing credentials. So these type of attacks are put in place to fake the user, to put their credentials, username and password, sometimes even more MFA, to be able to gather that information, steal it, and then use it to log in to a site and be able to then steal their access and going beyond that. Additionally, as well as people just stealing credentials, username and passwords that have been stealing from databases and all, because of that shared secret is known and can be used by attackers to log into sites. So still a significant problem. This, high numbers are across the board on the various industries that actually do the studies, as well as over the number of years. Just it seems like that is just a simple and easy way for attackers to go. So what we've seen, particularly on this government, and the U.S. government has been focused heavily on a number of security vulnerabilities, especially as we were talking about some of the more high-profile attacks that have happened with like SolarWinds and the oil pipeline attacks, and really putting a focus on this and significant focus around ensuring that one, MFA is used across the board, but then even diving in, in 2022 to really focusing on phishing resistant MFA and realizing that traditional, legacy MFA where you're getting an SMS text to your phone isn't good enough, because the bad guys have been able to figure out, ways to easily bypass those. And we just see a continual march to provide more regulations into this space to ensure that that is provided, as well as even just the breadth of how this is a cornerstone to a number of other regulations and approaches, such as zero trust, that the government is putting this out. So, and one thing is that was working on right now is just, clarification was phishing resistant. But even though this chart just goes to the end of 2022, there's still a significant amount of work based on this work that's been going on this year around CISA providing additional guidelines and plans around how to implement security in your organizations. And actually, we were at a White House MFA symposium in July, actually, that's focus specifically on how to implement phishing resistant MFA more and quickly across the board. So it's still and continues to be a significant issue for the US government, and particularly not just for their own agencies and protecting people that work for the government, but also for the average consumer, where people have to fill in their important IRS taxes and being able to ensure that their money is given to the right people, from government services. So now when we talk a little bit more about phishing resistant MFA, a lot of questions, well, what does that mean? And how is that different than legacy MFA? So this is the definition that NIST has come up with, and they work to keep it somewhat general. And the important thing as we look at this is really they want to ensure that systems detect and prevent attackers from being able to gather authentication secrets and that whole authentication process. They cannot be in the middle of that, as well as they can't have systems that rely heavily on the end user to validate that the website they're going to actually is the site that they are expecting. As probably many of you know or have seen, is that the attackers have gotten amazingly well about copying a site to make it look exactly like the site you're trying to go to. And once you do that, and then you put in your new username and password, then the attacker has that information and then can actually log into the real site. And we'll actually walk through some of those. When we talk about phishing resistant MFA, I like to break it down to a different lower level, so it helps us to understand what are all the components that need to be put in place so that you can understand what that means. So these 5 basic components we'll walk through, and it helps to really sort of more clearly define how these systems work. So the first one is that a phishing resistant mechanism is based on a trust relationship. So really what this means is the site that I'm going to, I need to have pre-knowledge about that site. So I've registered to that site. They know who I am. I know who they are. We mutually know that these are the places or the people that we're interacting with. And this need to be done not on my own personal level, but on the technical level underneath, so that there is that sort of relationship binding going on. Also, there's no shared secrets. So the shared secret concept is that we both have the same set of information, like a password. I have the password. The website has the password as well. But since it's shared and exactly the same, it then can be stolen and can be used by the attacker. So that whole concept of shared secret, has been broken down, where now all common systems around that are doing phishing resistant need to be focused on public key cryptography. Where in cryptography there is a piece that I know that's different from the piece that the website knows, and that I hold the private key information, which is key to be able to validate that I've got a proper algorithmic solution from the site that I'm going to. So really that goes into the next piece of possession based, because I can't hold the public key key material in my head. That information needs to be stored on my device. So I have that possession and I control that possession of that device that is holding the private keys. That way it ensures it can do the math properly and be able to validate it got the information, and also that it is truly in my control and that has not been stolen. So also, as we talk about um, the actual authentication process, that we both know both parties. So both users and right during the actual authentication process know that who each other is, so that I know that it's not a site in the middle that is stealing my information, but it is truly a request coming from the website that I want to go to. So that is done under the covers and technically done. And then finally, intent. So intent is that I actually know that I am logging into the particular site that I want to go to. We see seen a lot of push messages being sent, hundreds of push messages sent to a user's MFA solution. The user doesn't really don't know what's going on. You accidentally push it, when in reality it's an attacker trying to get your MFA, and because that has happened, they get access. But you really weren't intending to go and log in. So ensuring that clear capability and that you know what's going on is really important. Now, with that sort of in mind, FIDO Alliance, the Fast Identity Online consortium, came together, obviously, to deal with passwords. Passwords have been around since the 60s. No one's really liked them, but it's been a solution that's been in place and has a lot of stickiness because it does work, everywhere. But it has that innate challenges that we mentioned above, is that they are shared, they can be used by other, attackers, and you don't really know what's going on. So in 2014, working with the FIDO Alliance and bringing the U2F standards, with universal second factor is what that stands for, came about with us and Google to try and provide a better solution that was easier to use as an MFA, sort of just by touching the YubiKey, and it just provides that cryptographic authentication that you are who you say you are. At that time, it was still tied to a password. So you still had username and password plus a YubiKey. So fast forward to 2019, others joined the alliance to help go with and removing the actual password itself. So working on the standards across the board to ensure that the user doesn't need a password anymore, where now they can just use a YubiKey with a pen or a biometric to authenticate and still have that strong phishing resistant solution. But there's one less actual burden on the end user to have to put in their username and password, or their password. And the FIDO Alliance is still actively working today to continue to make it easier to use with Apple and Microsoft and Google, and ensuring that their browsers and platforms still provide that capability, and providing not only just a hardware-backed solution, but also a syncable one that works on the phones as well. So the nice thing about being part of a alliance is the same open standard is used across the board, so that as solutions are being built out, it can be used in many different ways based on the scenarios that you need. So I'm going to take a step back and walk through how a fake login site defeats legacy MFA. And we mean legacy MFA, we're talking one-time passcodes that are sent to your phone, your mobile authenticator app, as you've seen with those numbers, or you get an SMS text or an email saying, put in this number into the site to validate that it's you. So when we walk through this as a victim, and like myself or you are, get a link and say, go to this website to log into your bank or your IT department because there's a prompt. So you just click on the link and it's a fake login site page, looks exactly like what you do every day to log in. But in reality, it's a fake site. And the attacker is listening to that site and being able to gather and glean the information you put in there, which is you first put in your username and password. The attacker gets that information. All these are automated systems as well. And that is fed to your real site, where you really want it to log in. And the user logs in, or the attacker logs into that site. Well, then at that point, the real site will send you an MFA request, an out-of-band request, an SMS text, push notification, and it comes to you out of band, so it's not tied to the actual site itself, and you get that information, and then you actually go back to the fake login page and put that information in, and it looks like you've logged into your real site, but in reality, the attacker has taken that information and then taken it and put that into the real site that you wanted to go to, and then gets access. So because it's the shared secrets information and the site is just gathering that information, all this information is passed along. So now when we talk about a FIDO solution and how a FIDO system stops this, we'll go through the scenario again. So you're still going to go, you get a fake email that says, go to the site, you log in, the attacker logs in. This is a scenario where you're using username and password. For the username and password, either goes to the real site, but then the site at this point says, show me your YubiKey or show me your FIDO authenticator. And the attacker does not have that because you have that. And at that point, the attacker does not, can't do anything. It completely blocks the authentication process. And so at that point, the FIDO credentials are not really pushed to the end user and the attacker cannot log into the site. So this is there's many components to the security of FIDO, and this is the basics, as well as the browsers are also built into the solution to ensure that you are going to the right site as well. Now, I'm going to take another example and a lot of discussions about reverse proxy. So a reverse proxy is the case where you're actually really going to your real site that you want to go to, but you're just passing through a fake URL. So it's being that proxy up to the real site. So in this case, the victim goes to the fake site, and the fake site then converts and go to the real site at this point. At this point, they log in, get this information, an out-of-band text is sent from the real site, sent you go through that process into the fake URL, and at this point, authentication cookies are made, and the actual attacker, because they are watching all the traffic going on through that fake URL, gets that stolen cookie and then actually logs into the site. So it looks like, and you truly are going to the real site you want to go to, but there is this attacker in the middle that is watching everything. Now, when we talk about FIDO and how the FIDO solutions defeat this process, user goes once again to the fake URL, which is going directly to the real site. And at this point, the real site will ask you to log in with your FIDO authenticator, and the URL will pass that information to the end user because it's just passing that along. And the actual user then touches their FIDO credential, like the YubiKey. But at this point, the FIDO authenticator won't respond because it's saying you're coming from a URL I do not recognize. This is, you're not coming from the real site. So at this point, the FIDO authenticator doesn't respond because it just will not respond unless it is coming from the site it knows. And at that point, the authentication fails. and the user cannot, or the attacker cannot access the site because there are no cookies to be stolen. So from that point, a lot of the concept of FIDO is to be able to provide that high level phishing resistance, but at the same time, be able to reduce the use of passwords and make it easier for end users. So the idea is that it just works. And the reason why it just works is because we worked hard with the various platform providers, Microsoft and the browser companies, Google, to be able to ensure all those components are in place. So the user doesn't have to install anything. It's just built into the solutions that they already have. And to provide that additional protection, especially when you get rid of a password, being able to have a PIN that never changes, that's very simple to remember, is included. And really that is used to unlock the YubiKey to be able to provide the actual authentication ceremony. And it can be a PIN or also a fingerprint. So I mentioned earlier is that there's 800 applications that are involved that can actually use the YubiKeys. The nice thing about open standards is that anyone can use our technology and the basic technology to make it all work. Our goal is to ensure that the people and the companies that want to have stronger and better security can make it just work out of the box without added complexities. And that's the beauty of open standards. And that's why we all try and ensure that it works across the board, across all these various systems. So it's an exciting thing for a company like us to be able to see that it just works out of the box, or that we work with our partners to make sure it does happen and it makes it easy to implement. One that I just want to highlight in particular is recently, in January, is that security keys were now being able to use to protect iCloud. So Apple's iCloud now includes the ability to use security keys for authentication and protection to the iCloud system, just because they understand that level of security is needed for a number of people. And if you get access to someone's iCloud account, from a personal perspective, all the thing that manages these days, your phones manage, everything. You can buy things from it. You can, all of the telemetry of knowing everything about you, is a lot of that security is protected by how your iCloud account is secure. So having that higher level security is a great thing. And just the testimony to the standards that Apple is now involved with to ensure that it is implemented across the board. Now, when we look at using YubiKeys, I'm going to transition a little bit into how it's being implemented and how it is being used. Forrester did a study of companies that implemented YubiKeys in particular for 3 years. And a lot of the questions that come to us and to my team is around how do you deploy it and how do you make sure that all of a sudden my help desk costs don't go, or help desk calls don't go through the roof. Are people going to lose the YubiKey, and what happens? So we provide a lot of advice on that, and we'll talk about that a little bit farther down. But it's good to see from a third party to really see the value of the use of a YubiKey after it's gone into production. So they did a study, and the study is on our site to be able to understand all that information. And the good news is that one, the return on investment, the cost of implementing the solution versus the value you get from it was over 200%. So they could see that the reduction in a number of real costs, and that can go from cyber insurance costs to costs to the help desk, was reduced. And it blocked phishing attempts 99.9%. So that significantly increases the security posture for the company, which provides a number of secondary value where people work more efficiently. There's less time spent on dealing with attacks and company being down. So those things are critically important to companies, and having this data that Forrester went through to be actually go talk to our customers to be able to see how that works is really nice to actually see that, and really helpful too. One company I want to talk about is Hyatt. So Hyatt deployed FIDO passwordless solutions with YubiKeys. And they use Microsoft Azure AD. And a lot of the questions came about from a deployment perspective is, how do I get the YubiKeys and that initial setup process for new employees? So what they do on their process is they actually, ship a YubiKey with a new computer at the same time. So, and in this world of COVID, post-COVID, where a lot of remote work is being done, your IT department can't just walk down and help someone out. So everything's remote, and which adds additional complexity to help people get set up on their day one. And Hyatt's goal was to get their employees set up on day one. So they worked with Microsoft and us to be able to, initially have an onboarding, they call it temporary access pass. So that is your one-time code they can use for initial setup, and be able to, they communicate that with the new employee, and while they are sending out their new computer that includes a YubiKey in the actual box itself. So at that point, when the user gets the new computer and the YubiKey and the code, they can just go through the simple process to be able to do the initial registration, which then walks them through the registration to make the YubiKey use. And the reason they use that compared to a tap code is it's now a phishing resistant solution that can be used to provide their day-to-day access. Where as we said, temporary access pass by itself it's a limited, but it's still just a code that needs to be used. Now, when we look at implementations and deployment guides, we also know that the legacy MFA sometimes is still required as your systems get built out. So we have this concept, bridge to passwordless and bridge to phishing resistant and zero trust. So the YubiKeys that we have, our YubiKey 5 series, includes some of these other legacy protocols, TOTP, oath, one-time passcodes that can be used for systems that aren't quite ready to do a full FIDO or smart card implementation. So, as you look at implementation, and deployment, best practices, as you look at what you need to protect, some of those systems might not, there might be additional work, but it's still important to be able to provide MFA across the board. So the same YubiKey can provide multiple protocols, which does help with that deployment capability. So when we talk about deployments, and this actual information came from our partners, actually our customers, sorry about that, to say, initially, as you look at providing a physical device to log into, a lot of people are nervous about that. How's that going to work? How are the end users going to accept it or not? And they found that, and what we've seen, and even in that Forrester report, is after initial deployment, a lot of their, just the help desk calls go down. It goes very simple. So a lot of the work goes into ensuring that first experience is easy to use and successful. Because once they get it, and they can be able to log in successfully. So very similar to other projects you look at, what is the more important ones of the low-hanging fruit that are easy with probably a small team that can be successful, and all the components are successful, where I'm going to Microsoft Azure that has the built-in technology to just work with the YubiKey, and it's a high visible system that needs to be protected. And as we mentioned before, is ensure that the end user really understand the benefit. The benefit, not just for a company, but for themselves. A lot of times we'll see customers build out videos to show how easy it is, how they can remove passwords and not need to use passwords. And also, the way the YubiKey works itself is it can be used to protect people's personal access as well. So I can use the same YubiKey I use for work to be able to access, Facebook or Twitter, or X, I guess now. And that way, even though those credentials are managed separately and independently on the keys, so it is a separation of business and personal, you can protect your personal life as well, which, at the end of the day also protects the company, because if your personal systems are compromised, it's a good chance that then that's going to leak into your business side as well. And the other thing is, make it easy and repeatable. Same processes, same systems. Make sure it's as you build out one system, that system gets put out to a wider audience of people, and as well as ensuring that you have business buy-in, people at the top, ensure that those people are using their YubiKey as well, because at one level they are also a high target by the attackers. So having that champion in place is critical, which is pretty common for any IT implementation. But it's a journey, and it's very important that on any project, this is the authentication project, that does not go away, is that it is continuing to be built upon. So, we work together with a lot of companies to be able to really go through that process, connect with us to be able to ensure that the use cases make sense, and that from our experience, and how to roll them out, how to ensure that it does go smoothly as possible. And then and then validate the solution that we have. Especially when you're looking at, when can I use FIDO, or when can I use smart card, or when can I use OTP? A lot of it depends on the solutions you have in place. A number of older applications don't support the FIDO solution, and even some of the mobile solutions don't at the moment, where OTP might be good for a short term until those things get updated or your systems get updated. So that planning is important to have successful, and knowing where all those entry points. We work a lot with the various entry point companies, like VPN companies and others, to ensure that their systems have been up to date. And we see a significant update in allowing for phishing resistant solutions over the last couple of years. So your solution might not support it today, but it's a good chance that the next patch will, or that the next version does. So especially over the last couple of years. So if you haven't looked at some of your legacy VPN solutions, check in with them to see how they are protecting phishing, or using phishing resistant capabilities. And other one, as we talked about, the launch and adoption process, those areas are very important to get that right. One area that we haven't really talked about, in just all the logistics side of how you get keys to an individual, is that Yubico does have a delivery service that delivers across the world. And this became really important. We actually launched this before COVID. It became very important during COVID time to be able to ensure the users get their YubiKeys in a timely fashion, and they don't have to come to an office, and be able to ensure that it can be all set up right, once it just shows up at their door. And finally, with any project, and this is always sort of the challenging, is that this project, because it is authentication just isn't done. Measure the results, measure the areas that went well and that didn't go well, and then be able to address them, and then continue to work towards the next application or the next access point, whether it be, like I said, VPN, or your OS platform, or your cloud platform. So as we are wrapping up, we look at how we approach the implementations. So to that previous slide, is Yubico provides workshops to be able to really go deep into what the value is, where the pain points are, and also technically where the technical things that need to be protected. So that workshop goes at different levels to be able to understand that. So there are definitely off-the-shelf projects. Like we said, is if you're going to a modern cloud provider, a lot of the phishing-resistant solutions are built in place, as well as off of modern operating systems as well. But really understanding all the complexities to a company and all their systems, because we know that all of your systems aren't to the latest and greatest OSs and versions that a company has. As well as there's always very specific applications to your industry to ensure that people know how to protect those. And like I said, to that point is we do have that professional services resources to dig in deeper, and even provide the labor to do some of that work, because sometimes you might know how to do it and it's relatively easy, but you just don't have the people to do it. So having a team that has that experience is available to help. And like I said, that is working on custom engagements. The YubiKey itself can do a number of amazing things, and a lot of people have done amazing things with them. And having those custom engagements to really fit that specific need that you have. So, and to that point is, we talked about a little bit is the planning. How do you plan for this distribution? We found out that distribution is a critical component to delivering security keys, throughout the world. And we have built up that service significantly, actually spent a significant amount of effort into that space to make that easy for you. Because also, even just the distribution wing of a company is different than the security wing. So ensuring that all the parties on how distribution works of actual keys and other assets is good to be able to help everyone come together and know how that all works. And to that is that we have like advisors, not just technical people, but advisors to help out with some of that, as well as specific guides for Azure, as well as other cloud platforms that really just walk you through a sort of set, like, oh, this is how I do this. This is the best practices on setting up the conditional access in Azure's perspective, and to be able to provide that level of security so that there are no unintended consequences or holes on the deployment. And to that point, we also have a quick turnkey, simple deployment. So if you're not doing much of a bigger one, but just want to be able to do a deployment that's relatively quick, that's turnkey, there are that capability with our team. They've built those out. So it does make it a lot easier with a comprehensive set of asset libraries. And a lot of these aren't just technical library items, but just like, how do I talk to the business? How do I talk to end users to ensure that execution process goes smoothly? And the other thing that from a deployment perspective and a ability to use YubiKeys, there's always a question that comes up about, well, is the YubiKey, well, I have a YubiKey, it's a physical device. What happens if the standards change? So one is the standards are designed to be backwards compatible. So we always see YubiKeys that have been in the field for over 10 years that are still working today for customers. But also we have a UB Enterprise subscription that simplifies the procurement process and the ability to upgrade keys if there is something significant, or if you're not quite sure what keys to buy today. If it's I want a fingerprint bio key, or do I want a key that is more fully functional like the YubiKey 5, that provides that flexibility. And to that point, also that distribution center, as we talked about, we're covering over 49 countries today. So that's the high level of what Yubico, and I know that was pretty fast, but happy to answer any questions that we still have time for, or even after the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Like he said, we'll now start our Q&A session and take questions from the audience. As a reminder, again, if you have a question, please use the Ask a Question tab located below the player, and we will go ahead and get things started. So first question, and we get this pretty often, David. So what happens if I lose my YubiKey?
Right. So the YubiKey, by design, it's the possession base. So you physically have this and provides that security. From a security perspective, if you use a YubiKey, if you lose a YubiKey, it should be able to not still function and let you know the PIN that's associated to the YubiKey, or if it's done in an MFA second factor perspective, because they know the username and password plus the YubiKey. So there's still those separation of what I know and what I have. We're just trying to make what you know is less taxing on the brain. Also, when you register a key to a site, it's all independently listed, and you also name the key itself. So you have a good idea on which key has been lost, and you can be able to talk to your help desk to be able to remove it from the system or the platforms by design. The other deal is that if you think about what the YubiKey is doing, traditionally you have one username to one password. When in reality, you can have, with these modern systems, you can have one username to multiple YubiKeys. So a lot of times they'll have them up to 5 or unlimited number of YubiKeys or FIDO authenticators that you can tie to an account. So you have those sort of backup capabilities to ensure it all works. Also, you still have the traditional help desk to be able to have like one-time codes to get back into systems if you allow that. So it depends on your security posture of what you want to do. The other deal, and I encourage everyone to read that Forrester report that we have on our site, because that was a big question for me, is like, well, how many people is it? How prevalent is this problem? Because you can put it on your key ring, and you can put it in a particular area to ensure you're getting backup. And as we see, it is still a lot less than the people that forget their password by far. So it is definitely something that should be planned for. But as you look at companies that have implemented it and implementing plans around it, is not as a big a concern as potentially it could be.
Awesome. Thanks, David. So next question. As we see a rise in cyber attacks, what would you say are the most important steps in securing my organization?
So cyber attacks are continuing to evolve and continuing to be more organized, and by nation states, by gangs. And they are amazingly sophisticated and resourceful. I think one thing that people should realize, that, and if you haven't been attacked, is that you're probably more lucky than good, because they are working heavily to figure out a way to attack your systems. So beyond moving towards phishing resistant authentication and be able to, really it's knowing all of your entry points, frankly, and knowing how people can get in is critical. So there's that traditional asset management and patch management beyond just the YubiKeys to be able to ensure your systems are up to date. And like I said, is we're seeing a lot of the operating system vendors, Microsoft and Google and others, just being able to put a lot more security controls into their modern systems. And something that can be a challenge for, say, if you have to go from Windows 10 to a Windows 11. But a lot of the security is being built into the modern systems and then backward ported back into older systems. And so wherever you can, updating to modern systems should be high on the list where possible. And that can be a little bit of a challenge when you're talking about remote workers and they're using their own computers, and are they patching their systems or not? And that's one of the extra values of having a YubiKey, is it's sort of that additional stopgap against systems that might not be to the latest in capability. But to that point, is still patching systems and vulnerabilities is always high on the list, because attackers are taking advantage of them pretty quickly.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Next question. Can you explain what FIDO2 is and why it's essential as our workforce transitions to mobile-based applications?
Sure. So obviously, as we talk about FIDO2, and it is under the covers really a set of 2 different technical standards. And you'll see the terms WebAuthn, which is website authentication, and CTAP, which is client to authenticator protocol. They decided to break it into 2 parts. One, so that the web browser companies and operating systems can be able to focus on making the WebAuth calls and easy in use across the board. So a traditional website that you might control will make WebAuthn calls, and then and that actually then talks to the CTAP group of companies that deal with authenticators themselves. So that separates out the complexities of ensuring that how you set up a YubiKey to on a technical level is worked on. So, and the other part of FIDO2 is the goal of removing passwords. So the goal of those two standards coming together in a FIDO2 is to remove passwords and make it conveniently easy to use the same technology on a phone as it is on a security key itself. So, and now on mobile side is that the mobile implementers, we're talking primarily, iPhones and Androids are working off that same standard to be able to provide that passwordless authentication. So a lot of it on the phone is sort of under the covers. So as you are doing it, you'll authenticate or unlocking the authenticator based on your face or fingerprint, depending on their implementation. But the goal is that it's used across the board, so we don't have to rebuild solutions or edit solutions for different type of capabilities. Oh, I think Caitlin, you went mute on me.
Ah, talking to myself. Next question. Now that you've shared the risks, can you share some steps that my organization can take to help us get started?
A lot of the organization, to get started, and it really depends on the value of the executive you're talking to, frankly, or your bosses. So, in general, with any project, aligning to what they care about is important. And some of them care about security, and they should be, but sometimes that's not necessarily the driving force to get projects going. So the other areas that a lot of people come to us is that they are putting in YubiKeys to address cyber insurance. Cyber insurance prices have gone through the roof, and the cyber insurance companies have also getting more, diligent on looking into how you're implementing security across the board. So a lot of people will back their project by either meeting their cyber insurance requirements or reducing cyber insurance costs. I think the other thing, for anyone that is trying to build a project, we have the resources to help out with that. But if you look at that Forrester report as well, that's a good indicator. And a lot of executives will say, well, how do I know this is going to work? How do I know I don't have to replace it right in 2 years? So those reports help to show that there's the value of how it will help the company, either from a security perspective, an end user perspective of getting rid of passwords, or like I said, a help desk cost perspective, if it reduces the cost, either from a help desk people and their time to also even real dollars that you might get with cyber insurance.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for the great questions. And a big thank you to David and everyone who attended today's conversation. As a reminder, please leave us your feedback by rating this presentation. And again, the webinar recording is going to be available shortly at the same link that you are at now. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.